places that seem ordinary at first glance, where life moves quietly through streets that carry no visible trace of what came before. And yet beneath that surface lie stories so powerful that for a brief moment in time they defined entire communities and drew thousands into a shared sense of shock and disbelief. Today we walk through Snedshill and Oakengates, an industrial landscape once shaped by ironworks, pit mounds, railway lines and closely packed rows of working class cottages, a place where families carved out a living in a hard world and where neighbours knew one another's lives more closely than perhaps they wished. On July 30th, 1910, in this very place, an ironworker named Armel Turley murdered his wife Alice with a razor before taking his own life just moments later, a crime that unfolded in full view of those around him and would be reported at the time as a gruesome tragedy, almost without parallel in the annals of Shropshire. What happened here was not only an act of violence, but the devastating end of a lifelong marked by instability, fear and warning signs that many had seen, but none could stop. To understand the tragedy, it is necessary to look beyond Armel Turley himself and into the deeper history of the family he came from, rooted in the iron-working communities of Snedshill, Dorley and Oakengates, where industrial labour, poverty and alcohol often combined to create volatile conditions. Long before 1910, the Turley name had already appeared in court records associated with violence and disorder. In one case from the 1870s, Enoch Turley was accused of a violent assault at the furnaces, where he struck a man with a hammer and then chased him with iron slag and lime, leaving him severely injured and unable to work for weeks. In another dispute linked to a beer house, members of the same extended family were involved in altercations that escalated into threats of murder, revealing a pattern where drink and aggression went hand in hand. By the time Armell himself comes into view in the records, he already appears within this cultural context. His name surfaces repeatedly in local newspapers, not yet for extreme violence, but for behaviour that suggested instability. He was fined for drunkenness, where it was reported simply Armel Turley was fined 10 shillings, and again listed among offenders as drunk and disorderly. He was also brought before the courts for failing to comply with vaccination laws regarding his child, a further indication of tension with authority and social expectations. Individually, these incidents might seem minor, but taken together they reveal a pattern, one that becomes impossible to ignore when viewed against what would eventually occur. Armel Turley was not an outsider to his community. He was a skilled iron moulder working for John Maddock and Company at the Oakengates Ironworks, a physically demanding and respected trade, and one that provided comparatively good wages at the time, often several pounds per week, enough to support a family comfortably if managed carefully. He was also known locally as a footballer, having played for Wellington Town and St George's Victoria, teams tied closely to working class life and pride within the industrial towns of Shropshire. He was described as a keen footballer, a man embedded within his community in ways that would have made him familiar and recognisable to many. Yet alongside this more ordinary identity existed another, one repeatedly described by those who knew him. Witnesses at the inquest spoke of a man who changed under the influence of drink, becoming violent, unpredictable and dangerous. One police officer described him in stark terms as an unscrupulous, callous, cold-blooded brute when in drink. This duality, respectable worker and local sportsman on one side, abusive and threatening husband on the other, lies at the centre of the Turley story. By the time the Turleys were living in Jubilee Row, their marriage had become widely known within the neighbourhood for its distress and instability. Neighbours described their life together with striking clarity, stating that the Turleys had lived a terrible life and that Armell had always threatened to murder her. Alice Turley, by contrast, was consistently described as a hard-working woman devoted to her children, striving to maintain a home despite the violence around her. Her father confirmed to the inquest that they had not lived happily during the whole of their married life, and spoke of repeated mistreatment. At times she had been forced out of the home entirely, even entering the Wellington workhouse with her children, yet she returned again, illustrating both the limited options available and the emotional tie. On the evening of July the 30th, 1910, the pattern repeated once more. Alice was heard telling a neighbour words that would later become one of the most haunting elements of the case. "He's on again. I don't know what to do. I think he'll murder me." These words were not dramatic exaggeration, but the culmination of lived experience, a warning grounded in years of threats. What followed that evening unfolded in a sequence recorded with unusual clarity through witness testimony. After the argument escalated, Alice fled the house with her children, including her infant daughter Millie. She was seen sitting by the roadside before noticing her husband approaching in what witnesses described as a threatening manner. She ran towards the cottages at Mumpton Hill, a small cluster of dwellings situated just off the Holyhead Road, in a dip below the rise towards Priorslee, roughly where modern developments now stand near the Greyhound area. As she entered one of these cottages, she shouted, "For God's sake, lock the door!" But before the door could be secured, Turley banged it open, knocking the occupant across the kitchen. Inside, events unfolded in seconds. One witness ran for help, while others heard the struggle. Moments later, Alice emerged, staggering, still holding her baby. A witness described the scene in chilling detail. She came staggering out, with blood flowing from her throat. The baby fell from her arms, and she dropped to the ground and expired almost immediately. The attack had been sudden, violent, and irreversible. After the attack, Turley left the cottage and made his way up the nearby bank toward the main road. Witnesses observed him moving away before pausing, as if momentarily confronting what had just occurred. Then, in a final act, he raised the razor again, drawing the razor across his own throat. He expired in a few seconds. Police arriving shortly after found both bodies. The injuries were described as so severe that death must have been almost immediate, a stark confirmation of what witnesses had already seen. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Crowds gathered at the scene the following day, and collections were raised for the children. When the funeral took place, it became one of the largest public gatherings the district had ever seen, with reports noting upwards of 5,000 spectators lining the route along Holyhead Road, standing on pit mounds and watching in silence. The coffins were brought out of the house and placed outside before being carried to separate hearses. Hymns were sung, including "Abide With Me," and prayers were offered as the crowd looked on. The atmosphere was described in powerful terms. A feeling of awe seemed to pervade the crowd. Even the ironworks where Turley had worked closed for the afternoon so that men could attend. Yet the division between victim and perpetrator remained even in death. Alice was taken into the church and given full burial rites, while at the same time the body of Armel Turley was placed in the ground without any ceremony whatever, a decision that spoke clearly of how the community understood the events. Left behind were 7 children: Mabel, Gladys, Reggie, Violet, Dorothy, Ellen and Polly Mildred, Millie, who had been in her mother's arms at the moment of death. They ranged in age from adolescence to infancy, and their futures could easily have been lost alongside their parents. Instead, the community intervened. All 7 Turley children were taken in by the local community. Each would go on to live a separate life. Mabel married and raised a family. Gladys remarried after widowhood. Violet and Dorothy built new lives elsewhere. Ellen emigrated to America, and Millie lived into the 21st century. Reggie was adopted by the Edge family, and would serve during the First World War, becoming a prisoner of war in Germany, carrying with him a past that began in tragedy but extended into the wider history of the 20th century. Incidentally, Reggie Turley would be adopted by Jane Edge, landlady of the Queen's Head, who was brutally murdered in the 1950s and whose story I have covered in a video previously. Looking back today, the most unsettling aspect of the story is how visible the warning signs had been. Neighbours, police and family members all recognised the danger, yet it continued unchecked. Later reflection would conclude that there had been so many red flags, one must wonder whether intervention could have prevented her death. And in a final sobering reflection, male violence against women is still prevalent today. Today, the cottages of Mumpton Hill are gone. The road is different, the landscape has changed, but the story remains. Not just as a moment from 1910, but as a reminder of what was seen, what was feared, and what could not be stopped. If you found this journey meaningful, consider subscribing to Woodside Walker, where we explore the hidden histories all around us. Until next time, take care and keep walking.